Hi, I'm Sophie Goldman with Confluent, and in this module, we'll cover data serialization. So why is serialization important? Well, Kafka brokers really only know records and events as bytes. The consumer receives bytes from the broker, the producer sends bytes to the broker. The broker has no notion of individual types of these events. So it's important for Kafka streams or the consumer or the producer to know how to convert these actual useful types, your objects, whatever you're using in your application, into bytes that can be sent across the network or put into a state store. Now, there's two things that we mean when we say data serialization. There's serialization, which is converting from an object to bytes. So you might have something like a string or an integer or a more complicated custom data type. And serialization just specifies how do you convert that into the zeros and the ones that can be sent to the broker or stored in a state store that Kafka Streams uses. Similarly, on the other end, we have the bytes, and we want to know how to get some useful information or object out of those bytes. And this is what we call deserialization. So deserialization just specifies how to get these ones and zeros into a useful, usable form. Now, with Kafka Streams, we actually work with serdays. Now, serday is not itself a thing. It's just a convenience wrapper around a serializer and a deserializer. It's useful because you don't have to say those long words, and because then you don't have to specify both a serializer and a deserializer for objects that are the same type. They're never going to change type, and therefore you can just specify the serday. You also don't have to worry about when to specify a serializer and when to specify a deserializer. You can just specify a serday everywhere in Kafka Streams, and it will handle calling the correct thing when it needs to. Now, we've seen this before with the consumed object. For example, when creating a K-stream, you pass in this consumed object, and you might notice that it takes in these serdays. So the first argument to the consumed.with constructor is the serdays.string, and that's just a built-in serday that specifies that this is actually a key with the string type in that topic. Now, the value is this my custom object serday. So whenever you're creating a topic with some more complicated type, such as your custom my object, then you need to pass in a custom serday that you yourself will define. Now, similarly, for sync nodes, you have this produced with config object. And again, you specify the serdays that you saw before. So for creating a KStream object for a source node, you use this consumed.with. Now, for sync nodes and producing to an output topic, you use this produced object. And that also takes in a key and a value serday. Again, the key in this example is a string, and the value would be this custom object serday. And for state stores, you will use a materialized object to specify the serdays. And that is useful for when you're writing them to an actual state store on local disk. So how do you create a serday? Creating a custom serday is just a matter of creating the serializer and the deserializer that it wraps. As we said, it's just a convenience object. And to do that, you can just pass in the custom serializer and deserializer into this serday from convenience method. This will give you your serday. So how do you get a custom serializer and a custom deserializer? Well, all you have to do there is implement the serializer or deserializer interface of the Kafka client library and tell it how do you convert your custom object into bytes or convert bytes into your custom object. Now, luckily, Kafka provides a lot of out-of-the-box serdays so that you don't have to specify this all the time. Often you'll be working with strings or number types like integer or long, or even raw bytes, byte array, whatever it is. Anything that is included in the pre-existing out-of-the-box serdays, you can just use and don't have to worry about writing yourself. Now, that only covers some relatively simple types, but there are many more advanced types that you can still specify and avoid having to write the serialization for. And that's why Schema Registry provides several out-of-the-box Avro, protobuf, and JSON schema serdays that you can use in Kafka Streams to avoid having to write this yourself while using these predefined types that you're probably using anyways for your data in Kafka. That's serialization in Kafka Streams.